How did I get here? I just drove 9 hours round trip through 5 states, to the top of a mountain in West Virginia, to a place Apple Maps couldn't even get me all the way to, so I could pay almost $1,000 to a man for a truck bed full of parts. I'm told it's a 2005 Yamaha YFZ 450, powder-coated frame, all new bottom end, even has the oil mod, he says, and somehow I'm excited. I'm a level-headed person. I've never taken illicit drugs. I have a master's degree and a good job at a major university. How did I get here? Let's start at the beginning. I got my first motorcycle at age 5, a 1979 Suzuki JR50. We brought it home in the back seat of a Ford Pinto, with me sitting under the bike happily for the 30-minute ride home. I soon graduated to a Honda CR60, and my buddies and I were spending as much time as possible riding dirt bikes in the areas now claimed by the Hatfield and McCoy trails in southern West Virginia. Riding was our favorite thing, and we spent many hours back in those mountains. I moved to North Carolina in 1989. I was 15, and I dropped the hobby for teenage pursuits, like losing my license for reckless driving at age 16 years and 2 months in my mom's 87 Pontiac Fiero GT. But that's another story for another channel. Back to North Carolina. In 2013, my oldest friend came across a really good deal on a like-new Yamaha 450 Grizzly that he purchased, thinking he would flip it. He invited me to join him on a trail near Lenoir, North Carolina one cold February Sunday. He wanted to try it out first. I would bring my Jeep Wrangler while he and his wife rode the Grizzly. I was thinking I had the better end of the deal. Turns out I was wrong. We had such a good time riding the Grizzly, he decided to keep it. He told me I needed to buy one so we could get into the hobby together. I always missed riding and agreed that sounded like a great plan. I bought a 2006 Yamaha Wolverine 450 and a 5x7 trailer to pull it with my Subaru WRX wagon. And we proceeded to have some great adventures. We did 4-hour non-stop trail rides, we camped, and generally had a great time. I loved the Wolverine, but I was itching to try something that was faster and had a clutch, reminiscent of my dirt bike days. After some research on ATVs with clutches, I settled on the Suzuki Z400. I found an 07 for a great price that was 40 minutes from my house. Turns out it's not always good to buy local. Unbeknownst to me, the Z400 had a rough life. Although, when someone plastic dips working headlights, that's probably a sign. They don't make the best decisions. It was a lot of fun to ride, and it had what I was looking for, in addition to still keeping the Wolverine. It was light and responsive with plenty of power. It would power slide effortlessly, and I loved to jump and hop logs. But after repeated visits to the shop for repeated issues, the shop owner and I had a chat. She said that while I was good for business, she recommended moving on. I don't mind and always do my maintenance, but I'd rather spend my time riding versus wrenching, or having to pay for major wrenching. I decided to sell it, listing it with full disclosure of all the issues. I decided my replacement would be a second-generation fuel-injected Z400 in perfect shape. That way I could spend my time riding it and not worrying about things breaking each ride. I found a good deal on a white 2014 Z400 that was only 6 hours round trip. The pattern was starting to develop. This was a great purchase though. It was a very capable and fun quad with plenty of power. I had zero issues and rode everything from technical trails to natural motocross tracks while owning it for about a year. But then something shinier and faster caught my eye. I decided I wanted to try out Yamaha side-by-side with the clutch, the YFZ 1000. I listed the Z400 and sold it to some annoying guy from Mount Airy that just about made the sale not worth it. I began researching used YFZs and found a good deal on a like-new one outside of Columbia, South Carolina. After a mere 7-hour round trip, I was now the proud owner of a 2016 Yamaha YFZ 1000. The YFZ 1000 is an amazing machine and was a real performer and a special driving experience. The sequential shift transmission and clutch are unique to a side-by-side and make it a cross between a rally driver and a trophy truck. And it's amazing the terrain the machine will go over. But surprisingly, it just wasn't as rewarding for me as aggressively riding a sport-oriented ATV. Also, I was getting the motorcycle bug again, partly because my girlfriend's son had a great Honda CRF 250X that I'd ridden a few times and really enjoyed. It brought back a lot of great memories. I went through an older YZ125, a KX125, and then decided I'd try the 4-stroke route with 2 different KX250Fs, but I could not find one I was happy with on the trail. I was complaining about the stiff suspension on the 250F to another local shop that had been servicing it, and how even with the 4-stroke the motor was too high-strung. I'd grown up riding bikes in the 80s when all the 4-strokes were thumpers and the 2-strokes were screamers. Apparently things had changed a bit. The shop owner asked me why I kept buying motocross bikes to trail ride. He recommended checking out KTM since they had bikes made for competitive woods riding, even 2-strokes. After a lot of research, I decided to purchase a KTM 200XC. After purchasing a really nice 07 for a good price, a few weeks later I came across an 06 that was even cheaper. It has steering stabilizer and recluse clutch. I'd had a recluse on the YXC and really liked it. With it being tax return time, I decided what the heck and bought it too, thinking I'll just sell the other one. It turns out at the time, people were not as enthused about the bike as I was, and I had 0 offers. Finally, after over a month, the kid emailed me and asked if I would be interested in trading straight up for YFZ 450. I had not really been interested in 450 race quads before this. I figured they were not set up for any type of real trail riding, and I observed a few struggle with clearance issues on some hard trails. I did a quick search and noticed the YFZs were selling for around what I wanted for my KTM, and he was only 25 minutes away. I calculated it would be easier to sell and headed down to meet the guy with my bike in tow. I got there and he hopped on my bike to do a quick test ride, and I hopped on the quad. As I was getting on the quad, his father looked at me and said, "Be careful, this thing is fast." I did a quick trip down their dirt road, and without getting it out of second gear, I could not believe how much power and how responsive it was. I did a power slide U-turn and came back smiling and saying, "You have a deal." The YFZ was in decent shape, had a lot of aftermarket modifications. It had an extended swing arm, wider rear axle, Hauser steering stem, Nerf bars, Yoshi exhausts, and a steering stabilizer. It had a few minor issues, but it seemed to be in good shape. The next free Saturday, I headed down to Brushy Mountain Motorsports Park in Taylorsville, North Carolina, one of my favorite places to ride. The trails offer everything, from great hill climbs, fast sweeping turns, and plenty of jumps to keep you entertained. They have shortcuts to back to the parking lot from any place on the trail, a great thing in case you have a breakdown. Remember this for later. I was immediately blown away at how fast the YFZ was. Way quicker than my first or second gen Z400s, which were quick quads in their own right. Yet it didn't try to wheelie under hard acceleration like my 07 Z400, and it always felt controlled. There was a ton of room to move around when cornering, and this thing would drift and power slide effortlessly, even with a gunked up carburetor that was in bad need of cleaning, it turns out. I decided immediately that this was a keeper and would not be selling it after all. I welcomed myself to the YFZ world. I got the carb cleaned, and wow, it was a screamer. I suspect it had some engine work because the power came on almost like a turbo. It was amazing how it would accelerate and how much top end it had. After taking it along for a muddy weekend ride in West Virginia, I decided to give it a thorough power wash cleaning. I was so thorough, I managed to clean out the ability for it to start. It lost spark. After a trip to a local Yamaha shop and a new CDI and ignition coil, it was ready to roll. But yet again, I had the conversation. The mechanic tells me that this one is not a keeper. The wiring was a mess, and most of it had been changed by the previous owner or a previous owner, and not in a good way. I did not want to get into another money pit, but I loved the way the YFZ rode. Time to make another decision. To be continued.